It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Dublin. The US President goes back to his roots in Ireland, earlier urging the leaders in Northern Ireland to restore power sharing in Stormont.
I believe democratic institutions established through the Good Friday Agreement remain critical to the future of Northern Ireland. It's a decision for you to make, not for me to make.
The President praises the Prime Minister's Brexit deal as the White House insists he's not anti-British.
Also tonight on Sky News at 10, Prince Harry will attend the King's coronation, but his wife and children will stay in the US. The Scottish and Westminster governments to go to court over the gender reform bill. Doctors' leaders call for arbitration to help end the junior doctors' strikes after a second day of walkouts puts more pressure on the NHS.
Pressure is now starting to ramp up. The number of attendances has increased significantly since this morning, and majors' cubicles are now all occupied.
And the end of the fossil age. New predictions that renewables could overtake fossil fuels for the first time this year. We'll test the theory. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30.
Good evening from Dublin, Ireland, where the US President has been visiting the home of his ancestors, just north of here. Earlier, Joe Biden was in Belfast, where the message was clear: return power sharing to Stormont. The Northern Ireland Assembly has been suspended for nearly a year now, but the DUP has responded to the President's pleas, saying it doesn't change anything politically. In a moment, we will get the latest from County Louth and the latest leg of Biden's Ireland tour. But tonight's first report is from our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, in Belfast.
It is now my great honour to introduce the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
He didn't have much time to spare. This was the President's only engagement in Northern Ireland, where efforts to preserve peace unite a polarised America.
Supporting the people of Northern Ireland, protecting the peace, preserving the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is a priority for Democrats and Republicans alike in the United States, and that is unusual today.
Joe Biden had met privately with the main political leaders before publicly appealing for a restoration of power sharing at Stormont.
As a friend, I hope it's not too presumptuous of me to say that I believe democratic institutions established through the Good Friday Agreement remain critical to the future of Northern Ireland. It's a decision for you to make, not for me to make.
But the DUP's already made its decision, rejecting Rishi Sunak's new Brexit deal. So did the President's words change anything?
Well, it's good to have the President of the United States here in Belfast. We welcome him, as we welcome all visitors. But I don't think it changes the political dynamic or the reality that what we need is the reassurance that our place within the United Kingdom is both respected and protected.
Well, I mean, I very much welcome the fact that they've had such a strong commitment to our peace process over the last 25 years. And I asked him to stay the course with us and very much welcomed the fact that he has been very young people focused on this visit, that he has been talking about prosperity, opportunity for investment. So in the quick conversation, trying to get all those things in was my challenge, but I think I effectively did that.
The Good Friday Agreement has enabled a generation to grow up in peace, including the former student who introduced him.
I think today has just been a reminder of how far we've come in the last 25 years and how, of course, there is still work to do, but how resilient and capable our generation is to be able to make that peace happen in the coming 25 years.
This speech could be summed up in one word: potential. The President urging Northern Ireland's political leaders not to miss the opportunity that exists for significant economic investment here, if there's a stable government.
We're walking out this way.
There was a brief bilateral with the Prime Minister, both leaders in Belfast marking 25 years since the historic compromise.
President Biden and I spoke a lot about that, and we spoke in particular about the incredible economic opportunities that are there in store for Northern Ireland, and we talked about the investment potential that is there, the companies that want to invest in Northern Ireland. I think that's incredibly exciting. It will bring growth, jobs and prosperity to Northern Ireland, and I know he shares my ambition to see the institutions here back up and running.
And his message to this audience could not have been clearer. When it comes to preserving peace and restoring power sharing in this corner of the UK, America is still in the picture. David Blevins, Sky News in Belfast.
Well, the President is exploring some of his Irish roots here in Ireland. He travelled from Belfast to Dublin this afternoon, where he was greeted on a rainy runway by the Irish Prime Minister. He then travelled to County Louth, an area where Biden has ancestral roots. This included a visit to a pub in the town of Dundalk. From there, our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy reports.
After the political, the personal. Joe Biden crossed the border to begin his day of ancestral exploration in County Louth's Cooley Peninsula. His ancestors, the Finnegans, left the area for a new life in America in 1839. The last major landmark they would have seen was Carlingford Castle, where the president was given a tour. As the rain poured down, President Biden arrived in Dundalk. It was time for a short walkabout, meeting local business owners before heading to a pub somewhat improbably called the Windsor. Here, a clearly relaxed president felt at home.
In a sense, I know why my ancestors and many of your relatives left during the famine. And, you know, when you're here, you wonder why anyone would ever want to leave. I mean it. So it's good to be back.
It was, however, also the venue for the first gaffe of the presidential visit. Paying tribute to his distant cousin Rob Kearney, a former Irish rugby international, he said this.
You see this tie I have with a shamrock on it? This was given to me by one of these guys right here. Was a hell of a rugby player, and they beat the hell out of the Black and Tans. Oh, God. It was
clearly confusing New Zealand's All Blacks for the reviled British paramilitary force, the Black and Tans, which tried to brutally suppress Irish independence. It was a blip on a day the proud Irish American otherwise appeared to enjoy.
Look at this. Air Force One. Right here. That's pretty cool, man.
His next round of engagements returns to a more political theme in Dublin, meetings with the Irish Prime Minister and President, and addressing a joint session of the Irish Parliament. We can expect his comments there to stick more tightly to script. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in County Louth.
Joining me now from Belfast is our political correspondent Sam Coates. And Sam, how did the president's meeting with Rishi Sunak go today? There was some criticism that the president didn't spend enough time with Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, you might look at elements of the president's visit to the United Kingdom and wonder about the state of relations. There was its brevity, the lack of overt enthusiasm for the Prime Minister from the President in front of the cameras, and the fact that White House aides even had to deny that the President is anti-British on the flight over. But talking to all sides, including critics of both Sunak and Biden, it's clear that actually they're pretty pleased with how today went. You've got to remember the two men had different agendas. President Biden wants to appeal to the 40 million or so Irish Americans by basically having the pomp and ceremony in the Republic, south of the border, rather than up here in the north. Whereas Rishi Sunak wants to get the Stormont Assembly, Northern Ireland politics, back up and running. And even though there was no breakthrough, I think they were pleased that Joe Biden's speech was nuanced. He didn't rile the unionists by hectoring them back into power sharing. He presented an optimistic view of the future. The bottom line about the relationship is that this White House has decided Rishi Sunak is a man they can do business with, and the pomp and ceremony of the special relationship for the cameras, well, that can wait till another day.
Sam, thank you. Getting out of the rain now. We've all been subject to the rain throughout the day. Well, it has been a busy first day today as people in Ireland and in Northern Ireland turned out to get a glimpse of the president, and we do expect to see more of that. Hopefully not as much rain, though. But on Thursday, he'll visit the Irish president and address the Irish Parliament. There'll also be some tree planting and the ringing of a peace bell. And later on, he'll attend a banquet back here at Dublin Castle in the evening. Now, his trip will conclude on Friday with a visit to County Mayo, where he's more distant cousins that he can meet, and he'll make a public speech at a cathedral in Ballina. So another busy day for the president. He's on his way back to Dublin as we speak. Back to you, Anna.
Gillian, thank you. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the Duke of Sussex will attend the King's coronation, but he'll do so without his wife Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, and the couple's children, who will remain in California. Here's our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock.
This was the last time we saw them together in the UK. And ever since the Queen's funeral, speculation about the King's coronation. Months of will they, won't they, and now an answer. Harry's coming, but Meghan isn't.
It would have been pretty unthinkable and almost unknown in history for the second son not to attend the father's coronation. So it looks like they've managed by hook or by crook to actually come up with a solution.
The Duke of Sussex will attend the coronation service at Westminster Abbey on May the 6th. The Duchess of Sussex will remain in California with Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. No detail on what made up their minds.
No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth.
But their Netflix series, Harry's book and interviews made it clear there was a lot to discuss before they decided. As for Meghan, her absence is significant.
It shows that there's a willingness to compromise on the part of the Sussex couple and understand the importance of history in that the royal dukes are a really important part of the family. But I think it also means that there's very much an independence that's in place for Harry and Meghan that they're not really going to compromise on, at least not at present.
Security had always been a big issue for the couple. It's still not settled. Neither is the dispute between Harry and William. But at least coming alone, the Duke of Sussex avoids some awkward moments.
This is perhaps the outcome the royal family privately hoped for. There were fears the presence of both Sussexes here would have created a media circus, distracting and diverting attention away from the coronation.
The family rift seems far from resolved, but for now, the King probably just relieved he'll have both sons present for his crowning moment. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
The Scottish Government has confirmed that it will seek a judicial review over the decision by the UK Government to veto Holyrood's controversial gender reform bill. The bill was passed in Scotland just before Christmas, but in January, the Westminster Government decided to block it from receiving royal assent and becoming law. Our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis, has been looking at the implications of the two governments going to court.
Yet another constitutional clash looms over this country. The UK and Scottish governments prepare for a showdown in the courts. Laws passed here at Holyrood making it easier to change gender, something Westminster's blocking over fears it impacts on UK-wide equality laws.
We had concerns, as the UK Government Secretary of State set this out at the time, concerns about how Scotland's Gender Recognition Act would interact with reserved powers, about the operation of the Equalities Act, the protection of women elsewhere in the UK as well.
The Scottish changes speed up the existing UK process. No diagnosis of gender dysphoria or medical reports are required. Applicants must live in their acquired gender for 3 months rather than 2 years. 16 and 17-year-olds can also apply for a gender recognition certificate for the first time. A relief then for the trans community to hear the legal standoff is underway.
I'm a trans man. I came out about 5 years ago now, and this kind of change would have been a lot easier had it come in a bit earlier, in the sense of having the correct details for uni and not having to stress about it. It should be just quite a minor change in the scale of things we need, but it's become this huge, big culture war, which is really not very nice to see when people talk about you in those ways.
Scotland's new First Minister Humza Yousaf stood in the recent SNP election battle on a ticket that not challenging this in court would result in Downing Street thinking it could run a coach and horses through future devolved legislation. But his leadership rivals in that contest said it's a pointless exercise because legal advice was suggesting the Scottish Government would lose. So with so much taxpayer cash at stake, what is the right position to take?
We have, of course, looked very seriously at the points which the Secretary of State has raised within his order. We've, of course, very looked at the detail of that. But what's important...
But are you confident? That's the question that I'm trying to get to here.
Well, that is up to the courts. That is up to the courts.
But as a government, are you confident of your case?
Well, we are very confident that we have the ability to take this judicial review forward.
The UK government said it would not reveal its legal advice. Neither side is blinking as both prepare to ramp up the row over reforms. Conor Gillis, Sky News, Edinburgh.
The Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, has said that UK banks may need more cash buffers to cope in the future following last month's banking turmoil in the US. He was speaking at an International Monetary Fund event in Washington. Well, joining us live from there is our economics and data editor, Ed Conway. And the Governor, Ed, not seeing a repeat of the financial crisis, but the banking sector has seen stress. So what was his prognosis?
Yeah, the Governor very keen to say that he doesn't see any kind of prospect of a repeat of what we saw in 2008. And indeed, although we had the collapse of certain banks, including Silicon Valley Bank, most famously here in the US, and it had a UK arm as well, he thinks the broader financial system is in a pretty good state at the moment. But yes, some concern about liquidity buffers. And also, perhaps, in a sense, the most interesting thing is he also talked about the deposit insurance scheme that we have in this country. Now, if you put money into a bank, it is protected up to £85,000 at the moment. But he was implying that that might be a little bit too low. And so deposit insurance rules could be changed in future to make that higher. It's worth noting that here in the US, the deposit insurance, and this is basically saying that if the bank were to collapse, this is how much of your savings would be protected within that bank account. Here, it's $250,000, to give you a sense. In the UK, £85,000. And his implication is that level, which was set back in just after the financial crisis, so more than a decade ago, might not be high enough, and we may need to raise that. So that could be a big change for the UK, particularly given there is so much nervousness here in Washington, in the UK as well, about the state of the financial system and about the cost of living crisis. So more talk of that coming in the future days with the IMF meeting now at kind of more or less its halfway point.
Ed in Washington, thank you. The union representing junior doctors has called for the Health Secretary to take part in talks via the mediation service ACAS. It's the second day of a 4-day walkout today, already resulting in thousands of cancelled appointments in the National Health Service. One senior doctor who has stepped in to help out as the strikes take place has given us an insight into how hospitals are coping. Sky's national correspondent Tom Parmenter reports.
We are PMA doctors! We come from far and wide.
The junior doctors are still out. Their senior colleagues pulled in to try and fill the gaps. One of them agreed to take us into his day at the emergency department in Lewisham in South London.
The last time we covered the junior doctor strikes, it was incredibly busy, so we'll see what today brings.
This week is about prioritising emergency care.
Okay, so halfway through the shift and the pressure is now starting to ramp up. The number of attendances has increased significantly since this morning, and majors cubicles are now all occupied.
The warnings were soon going out to patients about delays in this trust.
I'm working inside the system is broken, and we need to fix it. And if we don't pay our staff, what they deserve for the conditions they're working under, and the responsibilities and expectations that they have, then they'll just get up and leave. And then the NHS will be in even more crisis than it is currently.
The Westminster government say they want a fair deal, but that the junior doctors' pay demand of 35% is unrealistic.
Thank you.
Patients are caught in the middle, but at least Phil can get on with his life. He volunteers at a food bank in South London. It was his cancer checkup that was postponed by the strike. He's dismayed that the government has yet to negotiate.
They know they're going to have to do it. They have delayed months, they will delay further months, and we the people suffer. People who are in far more jeopardy than I am, in loads more pain than I am, loads more anxiety than I am.
Everything points to this just carrying on.
If the government won't come to the table over a 96-hour walkout, then I have no frame of reference for what happens next. I would expect there to be further action.
So the stress on the system and the people within it just builds.
I'm logging off now. Like most of my colleagues, I've stayed a little bit longer just to finish a few things for my patients. It's been very busy this afternoon and quite stressful. The department's full, but everybody's worked tirelessly to look after our patients.
England is halfway through this walkout and the pain is starting to show for patients and the service they pay for and rely so much on. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
The press secretary for the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, has told Sky News that he's not surprised that NATO special forces are in Ukraine. It's after an apparent leak of top-secret documents circulated online. The MOD suggesting that the alleged documents demonstrated a serious level of inaccuracy. There are now questions over how the leak happened and what harm it could cause. Sky's US correspondent James Matthews has this report.
The US Pentagon, where national security is built on secrets, intelligence on adversaries and allies. This leak of sensitive documents, published on social media, covers both. As the US Defense Secretary met Ukraine's Prime Minister at the Pentagon, questions went unanswered.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, are you concerned that the documents will undermine Ukraine on the battlefield? No questions. Thank you, Press.
This can't have been their easiest meeting, because the leaked documents detail US training and equipment schedules to support Ukraine in its war with Russia. There was intelligence on Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and talk of Ukraine's battle for the Donbass region likely heading for a stalemate throughout 2023. Another document revealed conversations between South Korean officials about their reluctance around a US request for ammunition to be sent to Ukraine.
There's a lot of ability to digitally track back.
Bradley Moss is a national security lawyer based in Washington. The Pentagon investigation into who leaked what is something he's seen before.
If they can figure out the original source documents, they can then, sort of work backwards to track who had access to it and who were some of the last people to try to extract that off classified servers.
Following the leak, the Pentagon spoke of a very serious risk to national security. But it's also urged caution with regard to the documents, stating that slides appear to have been doctored. Similarly, the UK's Ministry of Defence says the documents shouldn't be taken at face value. Ukraine's defence minister said the leaked documents contain what he called truths and not truths.
I call it a special informational psychological operation done on purpose. The beneficiary of this operation is, of course, Russia. The purpose of this operation is to lower the level of trust between partners, the United States of America, first of all, and other countries.
Whatever its impact on trust between the United States and its allies, the Pentagon leak can't improve confidence.
Well, James joins me now from Washington. Real concern then, James, about the on-the-ground consequences for the war in Ukraine, and concern too about a video emerging of what appears to be the beheading of a Ukrainian soldier.
There is indeed, Anna. Yeah, this video posted online shows an individual in a green jacket and yellow armband, typical of the Ukrainian fighter. His screams are heard before a second man in camouflage uses a knife to decapitate him. And then a third man holds up a flak jacket, apparently belonging to the victim. It has been widely condemned internationally, certainly in Kyiv. President Zelensky has demanded that world leaders respond. He's posted a video online in which he says there is something that no one in the world can ignore. How easily these beasts kill. No one will understand if the leaders don't react. Action is required now, he says. The United Nations mission that monitors human rights in Ukraine says it's appalled by this video. Ukraine's State Security Service has launched a war crimes investigation into what it is calling the brutal murder of a prisoner of war. It's demanded that the International Criminal Court pursue its own investigation also. Russia, for its part, says the video is horrible, but has insisted it needs to be verified.
James Matthews, thank you. A man has been extradited from Pakistan and charged with murder over the killing of PC Brzezinski. PC Brzezinski was gunned down while responding to a robbery at a travel agent in Bradford in 2005. As well as murder, 74-year-old Pirandita Khan has been charged with multiple other offences and will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Thursday. The UK and Ireland have submitted their final joint bid to host the Euro 2028 Men's Football Championship. If successful, it could see matches played at Wembley, the National Stadium of Wales and the Dublin Arena. A new report has suggested the world will use more renewable sources than fossil fuels to produce electricity this year for the first time ever. The energy think tank Ember calls it the beginning of the end of the fossil age. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been investigating if the claims are true.
It would be a watershed moment. According to the report, it could already be a watershed moment. This year might be the first to see a drop in fossil fuels used to generate electricity, the first outside a pandemic or recession. This is the grounds for optimism. You can see wind and solar now represent 12% of total electricity production. Extend that forward, according to the think tank Ember, and you'll get less fossil fuels in the energy mix worldwide. And that trajectory is based on what's been happening in solar wind all around the world. You can see some countries moving at a quicker pace, Oceania, Europe as regions doing better, but everyone more or less on the same journey.
Last year, 80% of the rise in electricity demand globally was met with wind and solar alone. So every year it's been going on, wind and solar have been forming a higher and higher amount of the electricity that we use incrementally. And now that's taking us towards the tipping point where all of our electricity demand growth globally is met with clean power.
So, job done? Well, no. Even if it is a tipping point, fossil fuel needs to decline lots and it needs to decline fast. Clean power has been rising as a proportion of our mix. But because our total electricity demand has also been rising, it means that fossil fuel emissions are still going up. They may be a smaller slice of the pie, but the pie is growing bigger, so they're still higher than ever. And much of that is because of our use of coal, the most polluting fossil fuel. Now, there is good news here. Around the world, coal plants have been shutting. You can see them closing down below compared to opening above. That is a negative trend. That's the rest of the world, excluding one country, and that country is China. And China leads the world in renewable energy, but it also leads the world in coal use. You can see how many more plants it's been opening compared to how many it's been shutting. That obviously is not ideal. And that makes a massive difference for those projections we were talking about at the start and whether the world really will make them. And across the board, for all sorts of important measures, we are behind. Coal needs to go down, electricity needs to go up, gas needs to go down, wind and solar need to go up massively. And every one of those, you can see these projections, we are a long way behind the pathway to net zero. There is a huge amount to do.
Tom Cheshire there. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview, including this story on the front page of The Guardian. The headline, Biden pledges $6 billion of investment if stalled power sharing is restored. Well, tonight we'll be joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Sun's political reporter, Noah Hoffman.